is ESPN College Football Insider, expert and analyst. He is a national champion at BYU. Trevor Matich is back for another Matich Monday. Trevor, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. 3-0 looks really good. And if you don't look too deeply, then it looks great. So it's a good place to start the day.
Okay, let's just start there. What are you alluding to?
Well, listen, it's always tough to win at Laramie. Wyoming sees this as a Super Bowl for them. So I'm really happy for the win. I think there were some great things about that game. I thought the defense was, once again, magnificent in the way they attacked, the way they had so many different varied coverages and blitzes and things that they did to keep Wyoming off balance mentally. And then they just went and attacked them and kept them off balance physically by hitting them in the mouth. And I thought it was just wonderful the way they played. The offense overall played well considering their top two running backs were out. I was happy with a lot of things that quarterback Jake Retzlaff did. I'm not happy with 9 penalties. I'm not happy with there were 2 for 11 on third down. So I'm not happy with that at all in terms of consistency and moving the ball. And I'm not happy with, there was only 1 turnover, but there were other plays that maybe a better defense would have gotten more turnovers. And so there are things that they still need to clean up on offense.
Let's talk about the quarterback play, because some of those things that you're alluding to were some bad throws from Jake Retzlaff that should have been intercepted but weren't. But to his credit, he fought back and he put together, statistically speaking, his best performance against an FBS opponent, Trevor. So what do you think of Jake Retzlaff's overall work through 3 games for BYU in 2024?
Overall, you see him growing. The thing he does best is he's a baller. I mean, he is just an absolute competitor, and he's out there making plays sideways and upside down and right side up and everything else. And he makes a lot of those plays at times when other quarterbacks wouldn't be able to do it. You know, he'll fire the ball under pressure into a tight window and it's complete. And if you do that once, it might be lucky. You do it twice, you might be really lucky, but he does it a lot. Problem is then once in a while he'll make a throw that's maybe not as good as you would want it to be. And it's either picked off or it's exposed to being picked off, and then the defense doesn't finish the play. These are things that he needs to work on. I know that they want him to continue to be aggressive. They do not want him to play timid football. And I get that. There's a difference between aggressive and reckless. And he will continue to grow as a quarterback as he continues to hone that fine line between aggressive and reckless, because remember this, that he's making plays, a lot of plays. But more football games are lost than are won, meaning more often you'll lose a game because of mistakes than you will win a game because of a big play. And so he needs to continue in his growth at the craft of quarterbacking, in knowing when to take the risk and when not to take the risk. Overall, he's been exciting to watch. He is a big reason that they're 3-0. I'm not being critical of him, but I'm just saying these are some of the things that he can continue to improve. And as he does, his performance and his contribution to those wins will get even bigger.
Jake Retzlaff has been needed in the run game. He was needed on Saturday, 6 for 62, averaged 10 yards per carry. In non-sack rushes, he's 5.5 yards per carry. Is he a necessary component of the run game given the injuries at running back right now?
He's an indispensable component, and Wyoming knew that, and they couldn't stop him anyway. I thought that Coach Roderick, offensive coordinator, did a really good job of scheming up running plays for him to allow him to get free and to have space to run, regardless of the fact that the defense knew that he was the guy who was the only real threat on the ground. I mean, you might have some of the young running backs get 3-4 yards here and there. The defense, that won't bother them. Jake has the ability to go rip off 10, 20 yards, and that does bother the defense. And so he will continue to be indispensable running the ball against Kansas State, because I'm not sure that either Rapati or Martin will be fully healthy if they do come back. I have no idea what their status would be by the time we get to game time, but I imagine they'd be a little bit banged up. And if I'm Kansas State's defense, I'm expecting that the main running game will still go through Jake Retzlaff, the quarterback. And that's one of the things he's done so well. When teams aren't playing their best, when there are holes in the roster because of injury or other reasons, great quarterbacks will elevate the team around them. And Jake has had a lot of great play where he has elevated the team around him, even when they've had injuries at running back, since that's a specific thing we're talking about now.
It's another Matich Monday on BYU Sports Nation. Trevor, as you look at the offensive line and consider what BYU has done in the run game and pass protection, just their overall body of work, are you ready to say that the offensive line is clearly better than they were last year through 3 games?
I believe they are clearly better. I think they're playing together better. I think individually their technique is better. I think they're finishing better. They still have things they need to improve. And one thing that stood out against Wyoming is just assignments and technique on pass protection. There were times when one guy was a little confused about who he was supposed to pick up on a given blitz, and so he wasn't quite in front of the guy. There were a couple of times where an offensive lineman didn't slide all the way in front of the pass rusher he was supposed to get in front of. There were a couple of times when in the running game, when they double teamed, one of the guys came off a little too soon or didn't give quite enough help. These are things that are either mentally able to focus in on and fix that, or they're things that the chemistry will continue to improve as they continue to work together. There's still 3 games with a new offensive line coach asking them to do things in a slightly different way. It takes a little bit of time. Overall, I am really encouraged by what I see from them, and I see the possibility for improvement to have a very, very clear path.
3-0, 3-0 against the spread as well. How are you feeling about 3-0 this year compared to last year's 3-0?
Well, I love it because the defense is much more dominant this year. I think they've got more depth on defense this year. Jake Retzlaff is, he wasn't part of that 3-0, but he looks to be a quarterback that can take this team a long ways, as long as he can continue to minimize the mistakes. I mean, 1 turnover against Wyoming. He was involved in 3 against SMU, so you can see the improvement there. The wide receivers have got experience, size, speed. I love the wide receiver group and the tight end group. You put everything together, and you see a group that can win without counting on mistakes from the other side. You see a group that can rotate in more players and keep them fresh. You see a quarterback that's more capable now of executing the system. When Jake was playing at the end of last year as the primary starter, it looked a lot like he wasn't quite sure what was going on, but he was out there balling like crazy. Well, now he has a much better feel for what's going on from a standpoint of what he's being asked to do within the schemes, and that makes this team better. So I think this 3-0 is a whole lot different from last year's 3-0.
Trevor, as you look at Kansas State and the matchup with BYU, what is the biggest issue or concern for BYU as they prepare for the Wildcats?
Well, I'll give you 2 words. Avery Johnson, Kansas State's quarterback, is a dual threat, and he is a terrific runner. I don't mean not good. He is a very scary, fast, slippery runner. I mean, he's averaging about 7 yards per throw. He's averaging about 7 yards per rushing attempt also. So far, no one's really been able to figure out how to slow this guy down. And keep in mind that last year's starter, Will Howard, is at Ohio State now. He's good enough to start for the Buckeyes. But Avery Johnson basically beat him out, is what I hear out of Kansas State, and that's why Will Howard transferred. This is the guy that BYU will be facing. And Wyoming's quarterback is a dual threat. He did a few good things on the ground against BYU's defense. Overall, BYU's defense did a good job of slowing that down and keeping that from really hurting them a lot. It'll take a much bigger effort against Kansas State, though, because their offensive line is much better than Wyoming's, and Avery Johnson is just super scary. And what they'll need to do against that guy is slow down a little bit. In other words, they were coming with their hair on fire, rushing the passer against Wyoming. Against Kansas State, it's more important that they keep Johnson in the pocket. If he is going to beat them, they need to make sure he beats them from the pocket with his arm. He's a good thrower. He's not incredibly accurate, but he's accurate enough. But when he gets out on the move, when he crosses that line of scrimmage and runs, or when he buys time scrambling around on the edges and then throws the ball, he is incredibly dangerous. And so, ironically, the way that BYU will have to slow him down is to slow down the pass rush just a beat to make sure that nobody gets out of their lane.
They did a good job of that, the BYU defense, that is, against SMU, right, with the rushing quarterback. And Svoboda was okay, but playing from behind the other night. Avery Johnson, by the way, 64% passer, 163 a game. So he's not throwing for a ton, but he's running for 62 yards a game. So he is dangerous, as you mentioned. BYU, Kansas State. This is an opportunity, Trevor, for BYU to validate this 3-0 start and for Jake Retzlaff to really show out. Yet it feels like if Jake Retzlaff takes care of the ball, BYU's really got a shot in this one because K-State has a knack for scoring non-offensive touchdowns. Is it as simple as Jake Retzlaff taking care of the ball?
The whole team taking care of the ball. The whole offense taking care of the ball. But yes, it is. Remember, this is a theme that we'll continue to focus on over the course of the season. BYU needs to win, first and foremost, by being more disciplined than the other side. They need to play more cleanly. That means penalties, turnovers, missed assignments, indecision, things like that. And that's the first thing they need to do. It's really good that BYU skill players are outstanding. And so playing clean is number one, but then number two, to be able to spread the ball around to those guys, it gives BYU a good chance to validate it. Kansas State, they basically shut down the Arizona offense last week, and Arizona's got some outstanding players on that offense. Well, guess what? So does BYU. And now when they see that film, they'll be able to kind of see what they did, and they'll be able to build a game plan. I'm really encouraged by the way that the schemes of BYU's offense have been called. You know, there have been a lot of times now against Wyoming that there were passing plays that schemed to get one guy open, where they're running pick plays, where Keanu Hill had a touchdown early, where the receivers ran the defense deep, the secondary, and then Keanu Hill at tight end was just blocking. Then he leaked out, caught the ball in a ton of space, and ran in for about a 20-yard touchdown. It was things like that where you are scheming to get a guy open. BYU's doing a great job of that of late, and I'm really glad to see that, because against a defense like Kansas State that they don't really make mistakes, you got to figure out a way to create space for your ball carriers, your skill people to go. So these are all things that I think that BYU is getting better at. Kansas State, I think, is 13th in the nation right now. And if BYU is able to pull this off, you talk about validating the 3-0 start. It's much more than validating. It's sort of an announcement. They haven't arrived yet if they win this game, but boy, they're walking up the steps.
Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, let's finish with this. In the new 16-team Big 12, through 3 weeks, who are your top 5 Big 12 teams at the moment?
I think Utah's the best. I'm assuming that Cam Rising will be able to go. I'm not sure what the status of his hand injury is. But Utah overall on both sides of the ball is really strong. Oklahoma State has been up and down, but the fact that their quarterback Alan Bowman had such a massive game last week when their running game wasn't working really is good sign for Oklahoma State. Kansas State, I think, is up there in the top. USF is now one of the best teams, I think, in the conference. I mean, they were really good last year, but I think they ran into a bit of a buzzsaw, much like BYU did as entering the conference for the first time. But I think they've got the ability to make a lot of noise in this conference, and I think at the end, they'll be in that top tier of the Big 12. Iowa State is a team that's under the radar, but they returned almost all of their production from last year, including their starting quarterback, Rocco Becht. And Iowa State's usually at its best when people aren't talking about them in the preseason. I think their defense is stout. I think their offense is effective and efficient, and I think they're also one of the best teams in this conference.
Trevor, just to clarify, you like UCF at number 4 right now? Did you give those in order?
I do.
Wow.
I like, if you put them in order, yeah, but see, you can jumble the order. You know, with a healthy Cam Rising, I think you've got Utah and then jumble the next 4. And I think you could, but this is how deep the Big 12 is. I mean, this is a team that had as many as 9 different programs mentioned as potential Big 12 champions preseason, because there's so many teams that have a lot of great things going for them. USF is one of those teams.
Always the college football scholar and well-spoken. Great insight, Trevor. We appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, guys.